All right, let's dive into a real philosophical detective story. We're going to investigate a case that really makes you stop and think about how we decide what's right and wrong, especially when every single choice looks like a bad one.
So, here's the central question of our case. On the surface, it seems like simple math, right? But as you're about to see, our gut feelings about it are anything but simple. And that is the key to this entire investigation.
Okay, so take a look at these two classic scenarios from the philosopher Philippa Foot. First, you've got the runaway tram. You're the driver. You can pull a lever, switch tracks, and save 5 workers. But in doing so, you'll kill 1 worker on the other track. Most people say, yep, steer the tram. But then look at the second case. You're a judge, and a mob says they'll kill 5 hostages unless you frame and execute 1 innocent person. Here, most people have a totally different reaction. Absolutely not. No way.
And here's the puzzle, right? The math is exactly the same. Sacrifice 1 life to save 5. Yet our moral intuition just screams that one of these actions is okay, maybe even the right thing to do, while the other is just monstrous. So what on earth is the moral difference here?
All right, let's bring in our first suspect in this investigation. It's a classic, a centuries-old principle from philosophy known as the Doctrine of Double Effect.
So what is this thing? Well, the core idea is that there's a massive moral difference between a harm you intend to cause and one you just foresee happening. It argues that causing harm as a side effect, what some philosophers call an oblique intention, can be okay in some situations, but it's not okay to cause that same harm as the direct intended means to achieve your goal.
And this is where it gets really clear. Think about the judge. For him, the innocent man's death isn't just some unlucky consequence, it's the whole plan. He needs that man to die to pacify the mob. But the tram driver, his goal is just to steer away from the 5 workers. He foresees the death of the one, tragically, but he doesn't need that person to die for his plan to work. It's a terrible side effect, not the plan itself.
So the doctrine of double effect seems to give us this really neat 2-step process to solve the puzzle. First, you ask about the intention. Is the harm the goal or just a side effect? Then you apply the rule. And boom, it seems to explain perfectly why we'd steer the tram, but refuse to frame the innocent man. It feels like a pretty clean solution. Case closed, right?
Well, not so fast. Just when we think we've got our culprit, there's a major twist. Philippa Foot herself, the very philosopher who came up with these examples, started to get dissatisfied with this explanation. She thought the real clue was hiding somewhere else entirely.
And you can see it right here in her own words. She basically said, I used to think this was the answer, but now I believe the conflict should be solved in another way. And so she went looking for a better theory.
Foot's new idea shifts our focus completely. Instead of looking at our intentions, she wants us to look at our duties. She breaks them down into 2 types. First, you have negative duties. That's the duty to not harm people. Think do no harm. Then you have positive duties, the duty to actively go out and help people. And for Foot, this is the kicker. That negative duty, the one about not injuring others, is almost always stronger and more fundamental.
Okay, so now our detective story has 2 prime suspects, 2 competing theories. We've got the doctrine of double effect, and we have Foot's new idea about duties. So let's put them head to head and see which one really cracks the case.
And what's so fascinating here is that both theories seem to give us the right answers, but for totally different reasons. Take the tram problem. Foot would say that's a clash between 2 negative duties, a duty not to kill 5 and a duty not to kill 1. You're stuck. You have to violate one, so you choose the lesser harm. But the judge? For Foot, that's a conflict between a really strong negative duty, don't kill the innocent person, and a positive duty to help the hostages. And in that showdown, the powerful negative duty wins, hands down.
But here's what Foot thought was her smoking gun. Imagine a hospital can save 5 patients, but the process unavoidably releases lethal fumes that will kill a 6th patient in another room. Now, according to the doctrine of double effect, that death is just a foreseen side effect, not the intended means. So DDE might say it's permissible. But that just feels deeply wrong, doesn't it? Foot's theory gives a much clearer answer. It's a conflict between a positive duty to help the 5 and a negative duty not to kill the 1. And the stricter negative duty wins. You cannot release the fumes.
So it really looks like Foot's duties theory has solved the case. It just seems to explain our intuition so much better. But in any good detective story, there's always one last twist. And another philosopher came along with a sharp question that complicates everything all over again.
That philosopher was G.E.M. Anscombe, and she takes aim at what seems like a pretty simple part of Foot's argument, the scarce drug case, where Foot kind of just assumes that of course we should save 5 people with the drug instead of giving it all to one.
Anscombe comes in with this really subtle but powerful challenge. She asks, if you have 1 dose of a drug and you give it to patient A to save their life, have you actually wronged the other 5 patients? And she argues, no. The other 5 never had a specific right or claim to that particular dose. As long as the drug was used to save someone and wasn't just wasted, no one was truly wronged.
Her own words make the challenge crystal clear. If you save 1 person instead of 5, who can come up to you and claim you wronged them? As she asks, if no one was wronged, what injury did I do? And that one question really challenges the simple save the most people math that kind of underpins both of our main theories.
So our detective story doesn't end with a neat conclusion, but with a much deeper mystery. It leaves us wrestling with this fundamental question. In a crisis, is the key to morality found in our intentions, the difference between what we aim for and what we merely foresee? Or is it about navigating the conflict between our powerful duty not to harm and our important duty to help? There's no easy answer here, but in a case this tough, maybe figuring out the right question to ask is the most important step of all.